So usually the honey hats also what they do is they add a thicker silk. So even if it is silk, usually it is not even very silk, more sort of, it's not even silk, it's polyester or whatever, but it is a thick one, which is not, this is almost sort of, because it is so thin, that cheap silk of back in the day, that one there, they almost sort of laminated onto the gossamer, and now that it has disintegrated, the gossamer shows, and I'm touching it right now, and this is the sound it makes. It looks like cardboard, the sound it makes. It looks like some very thin, like the cardstock of my detachable linen collar, but even thinner, and it makes a similar sound. But this is very gossamer. I don't know if this is the gossamer or if it is actually a cardboard tape put between the silk and the gossamer to protect the gossamer. My idea is that this is the dried gossamer. I do not think this is actual cardboard. All of that is almost the gossamer showing, and the silk is sort of cream, but the material itself is almost translucent, and back in the day even it would have been more or less like that. And it's proof that that is entirely my theory. I don't think I haven't read that anywhere. They were really thinking these hats were sort of, already society was becoming more of a consumer society, i.e. more cheap things that cost less but are less long lasting, rather than less but more costly and more long lasting, more repairable. I will explain. One has to get back a bit. Until the top hats were invented, it is very hard to know about the sort of sugarloaf hat that the Puritans were wearing in the 16th century, I think it started in the 16th century, where it was a sort of top hat. So when they invented top hat in the late 18th century, it is more or less bogus to me. This is practically a top hat. But anyhow, they were all made using felt. Again, either from wool, but that usually was for very cheap hats, for cheap people, farmers and all, or from a beaver, and sometimes they would add plush on top, even back in those days in the 16th century. So practically the process was unchanged. Also, how they would do it would be actually circular, it would be a round thingy. It would be a circular hat. So in movies like, this is a oval. So more like the actual shape of the human skull. But this was an improvement made in the later 19th century. It was not like that until the 1830s or at least 20s. It was always an oval shape. And so the hats would not fit as well, but it could fit more easily, that makes sense, but it would fall more onto the head. This is more of a modern custom, i.e. made after 1830, to wear it quite high. Before that, they were usually worn quite low hats. Although too small and worn high, but even if made to measure, I think usually worn lower. And so when top hats, i.e. the more modern, more like that looking top hat started appealing in the late 18th centuries, again they were still made out of felt, and the shellac, I don't know if shellac was well invented, but the varnish, whatever they were using, when adding plush on top to stick the plush onto it, because again plush cannot hold by itself into a hat, or it will be a sort of flexible hat that will not be able to really hold as a top hat. It will look like Dr. Seussical's top hat that keeps falling down. I mean, not that it falls to the floor, but the crown keeps, this looks like wool. So anyhow, so they were heavy, I mean, but they were not very high. I mean, they were like that, or a bit higher, or a bit lower, and they had so many different shapes and brim styles, curves, width. But usually, in the early 19th century, the brim was usually much wider. And my fear is that people needed more protection because life was harsher. There were still a lot of people floating their loose contents out of the sash, whether they were in countries or even in cities, so that it was not improbable to receive one's chamber pot contents i.e. excrements and urine and vomit and whatever disgusting filth it was, onto one's head. So obviously if the hat was a dense felt, it had a chance of being washed chemically, and also it meant that with less of said disgust would reach one's face, and with a larger, wider brim, protect one's eyes, face, whatever. That, and also people were outside more. Umbrellas were not popular yet, would I think they had been invented even in the 17th century. I'm not so sure about the history of umbrellas, but they were not near as popular as they would start becoming from the 1850s, 60s. And people spend even more time outside, and especially so from the high classes and all people at least with more money, they would ride on horseback more because the roads were less paved, or paved in a way that made, and less paved, and more countryside and less cities were less paved and looked more like the countryside, and they were less big too, and so people that could afford to spend more time on a horseback, and thus the hat that they wore as part of their normal wear, they were, and actually was practically the same as the horseback wear. And that's also the reason for which in the early 19th century it was very much the fashion to, it was not only that reason, but it was very much the fashion to always appear as if one was dressed for riding, even when one was not. But it is a bit more complicated, because that at least is true for the evening, because usually for the elite and or at least the upper middle classes, which were very small back then, the upper middle classes, so usually people would change every time, so that there were more sort of upper classes, even if low upper classes. But if they changed, it was because they would spend most of their day actually on horseback. They could afford a horse, and carriages and all were not practical. And so again, the hats were actually designed so that they would offer a minimum of protection if they fell off the horse, or less worse if they hit a branch or something, whatever it was. So, with a gossamer hat like that, with one layer of gossamer, that is no protection. I mean, that, in the absolute, perhaps it protects a teeny amount. I mean, the protection would be, I mean, especially from the crown, the most important part, it would be minimalistic, so minimal that it barely can't. I mean, it barely changes anything. Obviously, it is more lightweight, but it does not protect. If it falls to the floor now, it already has a dent. That is how fragile it is. Even if I simply press to, I'm not pressing there. If I press it, there will be a dent and it will not go. I mean, that is how fragile these are, so they are not protective at all. So basically, by the 1800s, and again, gossamer top hats probably began to appear simultaneously as the silk ones, the 1810s. The first ads I've seen of silk top hats are these French ads. I think they were the first to make ads instead of drawings. Fashion ads. It says chapeau de soie, which means literally hat of silk. So I suppose that those were made out of a gossamer. So I reckon that the gossamer technique was invented in the 1810s. I think the first ad, the oldest I found, was from 1809 or 10 or 12. I can't be certain now. And I'm certain it's authentic. The drawing and the paper look very damaged. In a museum, Metropolitan Museum of Art, and they have scanned, digitalized perfectly all those things, and they can be zoomed in. And I've learned so much from those ads, so much that the historians telling us it's wrong. But anyhow, and they also start having even baller round hats, they call them, of silk and all. And also in museums, I have seen hats that clearly, for so many reasons, the historians themselves have dated them to the 1820s. I reckon some of them could be from the 1810s, which is very similar. And they are made out of gossamer, but usually those were only the silk plush ones, usually the French ones, or at least manufactured in France. At least the silk plush was manufactured in France. And so, but it really caught on when apparently the beaver population was depredated, because they had been making so much top hats in beaver throughout the 1840s, 50s, and 60s, so that by the 60s they started having silk top hats made using gossamer. and are replaced. But really, the gossamer technique was very well established before, because all the hats I saw surely seemed to be made out of